Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, campus minister and assistant professor of philosophy at Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio.
I often think that a lot of this talk of time management sounds a little manipulative or controlling or contrived in certain ways, and I think unless we have the attitudes correct, it probably does become that. But I feel that once one has a fundamentally healthy outlook on time as opportunity, and that we have a healthy sense of leisure and so on, that maybe that preserves us from becoming just mechanical. Because when we're talking about time, we're not talking about watches, really. We're not just talking about punching time clocks. We're talking about what happens between human beings. We're talking about relationships and how we humans respond to the God who's calling us each moment.
Joining Father Bacik in today's Reflections is Tom Welly, the general manager of a local advertising firm. Today's Reflections focuses on the topic of time management. Here's Father Bacik.
Tom, you're a good friend to come down and spend some time talking with me. We've had a lot of opportunities to interact over the years. I've always been appreciative of your friendship and your generosity that way. I know I was able to reciprocate a bit recently in doing a workshop for some of your people that you work with. You being in the advertising business, saw fit to ask me to come in and talk to about 20 people about time management. And I tried to do that under the heading of attitudes and techniques. And we spent, 3 or 4 hours together, I suppose, exactly, with your people, trying to deal with this question of how we could learn to manage our time better. And I'd like to just go back over that a bit, and then let's pick up some of the things that seemed important to us as we spent that time together. I know the major thing I tried to get across to them was a question of attitude about time. And I contrasted two different models, two different ways one might approach time. One was to live half-heartedly, sort of always distracted, absent from what was going on, not really immersed in the current moment. The half-hearted person ends up being too worried about the past, guilt-ridden, too excessively anxious about the future, trying to manipulate and control that future, in many ways unable to be present to the situation that's going on. So we tried to look at the half-hearted person in terms of our own problems. Like, where do I see my own problem with time? Is it because I'm too busy, or is it because I've got time on my hands? Because I've got I end up getting bored. I need to waste time, or people that don't know how to deal with leisure time. I talked a bit about the Sunday syndrome, and I noticed that some people found a resonance in their life with that, the idea that many people end up being depressed on Sunday because they're out of their regular routine, because maybe some people are sort of workaholics and are only happy when they're busy. But it is a fact that many people are depressed on Sundays or when they have leisure time, and that's when they're overtaken by anxiety. So we started out by trying to look at the half-hearted model and to see where our own problems were in that. I noticed that some of your people resonated with that or found themselves in that kind of picture.
They felt that was a very good image to describe the problems that they were dealing with on time management and time control. Ours is a business of deadlines and a business of many projects that have to be juggled and scheduled, because fortunately we're blessed with many clients, and so we have to juggle the workload. It's the secret perhaps of effectiveness in our business is good time management, and that's why we wanted you to come in, because we knew we could get better at what we're working with.
I suppose your people have that big problem of being too busy.
Yeah, their problem is always been one, or has been hopefully, and will continue to be too busy as opposed to not busy enough.
Many demands on their time, but that can create problems for them elsewhere, can't it? Because they're so involved at work and maybe have to put extra time in at work that they need to be able to be present to their families, or to find some time for their own personal growth that maybe they don't end up doing.
As a complete person, they have to move in those directions, because if they were totally devoted to their work and their work was exclusive, they wouldn't be nearly as effective.
And that's
I've always been, for example, I've always been very concerned about people who have to work long hours, which is typical of our business. The productivity drops off, the creativity, the real class of the operation suffers, as well as their home life. Who can be happy with that kind of an arrangement?
This is our common problem, isn't it? For many people in our world, to be too busy, not enough time to go around, and to find ourselves not attending either to family or friends or to our personal growth. So we tried to talk about that half-hearted person, and I contrasted that with what I'm calling the wholehearted person, and tried to put that forth as an ideal that would guide us. I'm always thinking that if we're going to make progress in life, we've got to know where we're going. We've got to have some sense of what we would like to be like in the future. And I think this model of the wholehearted person is a good one. And so I talked about the person living with gusto, that we only go around once in life and that we have to seize all of our opportunities. It seems to me that the wholehearted person enjoys life, finds meaning in what they're doing generally. The wholehearted person has come to terms with their past. They've integrated both the good and the bad from their past into their present character and personality. And the wholehearted person keeps a proper anticipation of the future. They have a dream of what things might be like. They got goals that they're striving for. But they do so in a balanced way, knowing that they're never going to achieve those entirely and that they need to do some systematic work in order to move in that direction. So I see the wholehearted person as being the one who has learned to manage time properly and therefore lives a richer and fuller kind of life. So we tried to put that model in front of the people. I noticed that afterwards when we talked about it, that some people said that they found that to be extremely helpful as a sort of guideline.
Yes, I think it's a notion that's hard to put a tag onto, and in fact, it's interesting. You used we being an advertising agency used advertising slogans, "Live with Gusto" and "The Full Life" and that sort of thing to describe it. But I do think that it describes well what happens when time is managed right. And again, going back to the quality of time, not so much that your time may be limited, it may be rationed, but at least it's with great gusto and with great quality. I noticed one other thing in reference to describing how time can be controlled. I was surprised no one mentioned this to you, that we find, for example, in our work, that if we're given 4 hours to complete a job or 4 days to complete a job, chances are the same amount of time will really be devoted to that job. That it's only the deadline that creates the job. If our organization, like many other creative organizations, were given unlimited deadlines, we probably get nothing done.
That's interesting. There's a general law about that. I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but we will fill up all of the space with work as we move towards a deadline. We'll take up all the available time.
Right. I'm not suggesting all of the jobs are that way, but what in essence happens is that the job just seems naturally to require so much time to get it handled.
Mm-hmm. I think that what we tried to do after that was to move into the question of techniques. That is, how are we going to do this? How are we going to end up managing our time better? And one of the major things that I did was to talk about meditation, which might seem strange. I don't think many time management people end up talking about meditation. Maybe they do, but to me it is crucial. And I taught them a meditation technique, something that out of the Christian tradition we call the Jesus prayer. That is relating a prayer to one's breathing and repeating the name of Jesus, and which in other religious traditions are known as transcendental meditation and so on. But the essence of it is to sit oneself down comfortably and without any distractions, close one's eyes and breathe in through the nostrils and be very conscious of the breath going in, and to be very aware as we let our breath out to say a particular prayer or mantra, as they call it in the Eastern traditions, to repeat the phrase over and over, so that one is seated and breathing in, and as one lets one's breath out, just silently in one's own mind, we try to say the little prayer, like I usually say, "My Lord and my God." So we ended up trying to teach them this technique, And we practiced it for about 10 minutes, which may not be long enough to really get into it. But I know in the past I've taught this technique to some students of mine and found out that when I quizzed them a month later or 6 weeks later, that many of them had continued the practice to do that kind of meditation every day. I personally place it as one of the high priorities in my life, and it seems to me that it has a great bearing on time management. And the reason that it does is because of the results. What that kind of meditation does is help to concentrate our attention, to quiet our mind, to help us to put aside distractions. It very often causes a physical relaxation in the body. There's even a book out, I think, called The Relaxation Response, which talks about, from medical terms, what this kind of meditation can do for one. And I think that by concentrating us and getting rid of distractions and relaxing us, what it does is to prepare us better to meet the demands of our time. It allows us to be more aware of what is going on. We come out of that meditation more patient, more ready to deal with other things. So strange as it may seem, it seems to me one of the great techniques for time management is this business of regular meditation.
Well, it should be interesting to see, particularly how our creative people respond to it, because as you've said, and as you mentioned to them, that it greatly enhances the creative process. The other side of the coin, of course, will be when I go to the office and everyone is meditating at the same time and the phones are ringing and nothing's happening.
I can just see that, you walking in the office and all these people sitting there in this quiet position, no work getting done.
I'm going to call you back.
Yeah, right. We'll have to have a new conference for them then. But I'm glad you brought up that creativity notion, Tom, because I do think that happens. I find that myself, that very often if I can have some ideas floating around in my head before I do the meditation, when I actually sit down to do it, I will get creative thoughts at times. Sometimes it's good to have a pad of paper right nearby and just to jot them down as they come to you. A friend of mine told me that a long time ago, that he got that he did it that way, and I think I found that effective. Okay, so we did the meditation, and then the next kind of thing we did with your people was to try to help them to set goals and activities and priorities. And one of the notions of this was that we had to know where we were going with our life. We had to know what the future should bring us and what we wanted to happen. I tried to get them to set long-range, lifelong goals and also more proximate goals. Kind of person I would like to be. What do I want to accomplish? Even suggested to them they might figure what they want put on their tombstone someday, or how they want to be remembered. What kind of person do we want people to think of us as? So I think that that seemed to be an important thing to do, to set those goals, but also to get the activities that would move us in that direction. I mean, once I got a goal, I got to figure out how I'm going to get there. And I could list a bunch of activities along with a bunch of goals that I would have, and the next step seemed to be to set priorities for them. Now, this is a very common technique in the business world all over, time management and so on. All organizations do it these days, but we tried to relate it in this case to time management. So we had these three things going. What are my goals? What are my the activities I need to do to get there? And what kind of priority do I give to each of those?
Yeah, and I think the key there is establishing the activities and the actions that need to be carried forth in order to reach those goals. Not setting the goals only won't get that handled, but I know in talking to people afterwards, they responded very well to that and wrote them down. And you in your exercise, you had everyone write them down, and they particularly responded to the fact that it was good, it was healthy to have written them, not only to have thought them or to have said them.
Yeah, in our little wrap-up at the end, I think one fellow said that you can let goals sort of run around in your head and they become vague, but to have to write them down seems a very healthy thing. It gives them a concrete character and maybe even a sort of impetus to strive for those, because you have now clarified them. The next thing, Tom, we took up was the business of scheduling, of trying to work on a given day, for example, how we're going to handle things, or for a given week. And one of the points that I made in that session was that to try to do the high priority items when we function best in order to see that they end up getting done. it seemed like one of the things we wanted to do was to figure out what the things were that were most important to do in the day, and then figure out when we ought to do them. I know in my own life I've tried to introduce this in the recent past. One of the things I have to do is to write. Periodically I have to write articles and so on, and that's always a burdensome kind of task. It's hard, it's arduous, I don't like to do it, and it takes a lot to get me going with it. So I used to write maybe later in the evenings after I had most other things taken care of, and tried to do a little bit of reading in the morning. So what I did was switch those two things, so that I tried to do the writing in the morning, try to get a fresh start on it, get going at it when I might have had less chance of interruption, and save the reading for the nighttime later on, and feeling that maybe then if that didn't get done, it wouldn't be so bad as if I didn't do the deadline, make my deadlines for writing. So that one good thing that's resulted from that, I've noticed, is that I'm not as upset with the fact that that's hanging over my head. So all day long I'd be thinking I'm doing this other stuff, but boy, I got to write that article, and what a terrible ordeal that's going to be, and so on. But when I try to do it earlier on, it seems to work better. So that's the kind of thing that we tried to do in that scheduling thing.
I think that an individual has to, when they're attempting to schedule themselves, they have to determine, almost in a sense, I've heard the term used, of whether they're a winder or an unwinder. If they jump out of bed in the morning and throw up the window, and they're all excited and breathing in the fresh air, and they're ready to go with great gusto, as you had talked earlier, then they've got to plan their key activities early in the day. Mm-hmm. Of course, one of the great problems of married life is when the winder and the unwinder get married, because they almost have to meet at 12 o'clock noon in order to communicate and to deal effectively with each other. But it is a problem relative to this, and I think that you have to find out which way your metabolism seems to work. It's a practical thing.
Yeah, and you can work it the other way then too, and say that when you're not functioning well is the time to maybe to do more routine kind of activities, to make phone calls you have to do, or to write notes, or the things that don't require the same energy level or the same degree of concentration. So that this thing could function in both of those ways. Maybe it's helpful, too, to make a schedule each day of things that have to get done. That's a very common technique in time management, to actually write down and to cross them off as you end up doing it, and to make sure you have some priority in it. So all of that seems to be important. I noticed that when I had them write down here, I asked them to try to figure out when they functioned best. And I suppose a lot of people aren't even quite aware of that. And so that what my method here was to say, write down your most important daily or weekly activity, the thing that you really feel needs to get done. Then write down when you do it, and then write down when your best time is. And what you might figure out is you're doing the most important thing of all at a time when you are least prepared to do it. And therefore that calls for the adjustment.
One interesting exercise that we didn't do, but which might have been interesting, would have been to ask, in a group like ours, relatively small, and with everyone working with each other fairly closely, would be to have asked an individual, how would the other person answer that question, in terms, are they an early morning person, are they the people who would do the most important things early in the day, and when was their creativity at its height, which is the field that we're in. Mm-hmm. That'd been interesting to react, because in fact, I was asking myself, I wondered if I knew the answer to that.
For each of the people?
For each of the people, yeah.
Uh-huh. I suppose husbands and wives might be good at that, be able to
hopefully they would know that.
Yes, right. It might even give us insight to hear what other people think about it. Maybe we're out of sorts at times when we hardly realize it. And if people told us that, it would really be helpful. I often think that a lot of this talk of time management sounds a little manipulative or controlling or contrived in certain ways, and I think unless we have the attitudes correct, it probably does become that. But I feel that once one has a fundamentally healthy outlook on time as opportunity, and that we have a healthy sense of leisure and so on, that maybe that preserves us from becoming just mechanical. Because when we're talking about time, we're not talking about watches, really. We're not just talking about punching time clocks. We're talking about what happens between human beings. We're talking about relationships and how we humans respond to the God who's calling us each moment. So I think we need that perspective as we're going along. In fact, it bears on the next thing I had them do. I tried to have them figure out how they spent their time between or among personal things, family responsibilities, and work time. And I think that I just tried to get them to say directly, how much time in a regular day do you give to work, how much to family, and how much to personal growth, and try to insist that personal growth included leisure and recreation and so on.
I was very impressed with the point that you made in terms of the quality of the time as opposed to the numerical number of hours, because you use an example of a mother who might take 5 minutes with each of her children before they went to bed, that 5-minute period might be so much more advantageous to both mother and child than it would be to spend 2 hours raving and ranting and going round and round with all of them as a group. That quality of time was the note that I remember I took in that section.
Yeah, that came out in that. Yeah, and I think that's true. And I think that it was probably a mistake to focus just in on numbers and how many hours. The question is, how good is that time? What the quality? That word quality is good in trying to get at, I think, what we're after here. I suppose that my common sense is that most people are working too much and not really getting involved in the leisure and the recreation. I thought it was a terrific thing that your company would do this for their employees, that they would take time out for the personal growth. Of course, there's always a payoff to the company, I understand that, but it's also a good thing for the people involved. It gives them a chance to spend some time on what I would consider to be personal growth. And I think we need that. I think one of the problems here is with the leisure time and people not being able to get wholehearted about that. I think about some of the students that I counsel who are going downtown to have a good time with their friends, and they might go down there, but they're distracted. They're thinking, well, I should be back home writing that paper, or I got that test tomorrow, or I should be studying. And even when they're supposed to be having a good time with their friends downtown, they're really not doing that. And one of my theories of this is we got to get wholehearted about our leisure, learn how to play well, to get really immersed and involved in all of that. And the better thing would seem to do to get into the studies, do the best you can, and say, that's enough for tonight. Now I'm going to a movie or going to a ball game or going downtown and have a drink with my friends.
It's a great notion, because I do believe that we, as human beings, we tend to avoid that. We if we're going to have a good time, we tend to think about other things that maybe we should be doing and that type of thing, instead of, hey, don't have so many good times, perhaps. But when you do have the good time, have it with, as you say, with great gusto and wholeheartedness. I think that's a great idea.
Tom, we also try to talk about saving time and trying to identify the time-wasting elements in our lives. I think that probably we could all look at our daily routine and find out that we have really not maximized all of the time, not used it as well as we might have. And it's probably good to try to look through some of those things. I know that I suggested that one of the key techniques is to handle papers only once. I've been trying to do that myself lately, like in getting mail that requires a response, to try to answer it right away, or getting seeing articles that I want to save, to try to file them right away. I really haven't gotten very good at that yet, but it does make a degree of sense to me to say to try to cut down on the paperwork. I think so many people feel bogged down in bureaucracies today and demands of paperwork that it's hard to escape it, and I'm not sure there's any really good answers to it, but that might be one thing that could be done. I also mentioned the reading material that is worthwhile. We only got so much time to read. If you're going to read one book, you might as well read a classic or read something that's really good or written by a reputable kind of author rather than reading a lot of pulp, especially if you're trying to improve yourself or relate it to your job in some way.
One of the thoughts that you gave that I liked was in terms of the handling of the telephone, and that telephone calls could be major interruptions. It takes some skill to be able to talk to someone on the phone for a brief period of time and yet have them feel satisfied by the conversation, that you're not cutting them short, but in reality you are cutting them short.
Tom, a lot of us spend time at meetings. Did you catch that one suggestion that one author said that you should hold all meetings standing up, and that in this way we would really cut down the time and get our business done much quicker. I'm not sure that one is practical, but I
wonder how long.
We do waste a lot of time at meetings, I think.
Oh, I agree, but I do kind of wonder how long our 4-hour session on time would have lasted if we were all standing up.
Yeah, I don't think that would have really worked, would it? Not at all. The final thing I took up was a little heavy, wasn't it? Talking about the type A personality, people who supposedly are about twice as prone to heart attacks as other people. I've just read some stuff recently on that, and they list a lot of characteristics of this type A personality that are so prone to heart attacks. They thinking or doing two things at once, scheduling more and more activities into less and less time, failing to notice your environment or things of beauty, hurrying the speech of others. That means while other people are talking, interrupting them. I think I
would never interrupt you.
Characteristic on this radio program. Becoming unduly irritated when waiting in line or driving behind a slowly moving car. Think of my father in that. He hated to stand in line.
I always wanted a machine gun in the front of my car.
Yes, believing that if you want something done, you will have to do it yourself. Making a fetish of always being on time, having difficulty sitting down and doing nothing. Playing nearly every game to win, including against children. Measuring success in terms of numbers. Becoming impatient, watching others do things you think you can do better or faster. Well, we got a whole bunch of things here that they list in this thing. So, Tom, we spent some time talking with your people, tried to get better time management. It's a matter of attitudes and practical things. I think it's up to people to sort of look at their own lives and figure out indeed how they could manage their time better and create a healthier attitude.
You've been listening to Reflections with your host, theologian Father James Bacik, campus minister and assistant professor of philosophy at Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio. Joining Father Bacik in this discussion was Tom Welly, the general manager of a local advertising firm. The topic of this week's Reflections was time management. If you have any questions about today's program or any ideas for topics you'd like to hear discussed, please write to Reflections in care of WLQR, Toledo, Ohio 43623. Produced in the studios of WLQR, Reflections is directed by Mark Ferguson. Executive producer is Mary Beth Kirchner. Reflections is brought to you by the Genesis Radio Network.